Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Board of Education meeting on October 19th, 2020. We've got several items on the agenda today. First off is under 2.1 is the extended COVID-19 learning plan review for October. As you may recall, Board, that as a matter of protocol, the legislature, not the governor, but the legislature had enacted a public act that required a monthly review of our extended COVID plans that you had approved last month in September. That went into effect subsequently. And so this is our first review. We have to review our COVID learning plans each month at one of our board meetings from here through the school year. So this is our first review since your approval last month on our extended plan. So I'm going to I have Dan, who is at the cockpit today, substituting for Julie, as Julie is out. So Dan is subbing in her spot. So he's going to put up the extended COVID learning plan for us. There's some specific pieces of the plan that we're obligated to review each month, and I will highlight those for you. This same plan is found on our website. So I'm not going to go through every part and parcel of this plan, but it is out there for public view on our website. When you go on to all of the COVID documentation within that tab on the website. So this is one of the reports that is there. So if you could scroll down, Dan. This has been amended as of September 30th. So you'll see that there's assurances revised as of September 30th. When the legislature approved the budget for this coming year, the school aid budget, there were some strings that came with that school aid budget, and a couple of them were placed in the insurances in this document. And so keeping in accord with the most current version of the extended COVID learning plan, this is what we have moving forward for the remainder of the year, is this plan with the assurances. So go ahead and scroll down to the assurances. So you'll see here under number 2, one of the new adds of the assurances that was by not later than January of 2021. We will be presenting to you a report that has to do with professional development, and it has to do with when and how much professional development we've offered staff in regards to the focus on the how and the delivery of virtual content. And the second piece of that is the provision of training, virtual content, on how to access and use virtual content for parents and for students. So those are components that are newly added, again, as of September 30th, that we will be reporting on in January. So that is one of the new reports that we have to do. Tonight, we're going to be presenting to you benchmark assessments, although those aren't due until January when we do a mid-year report on the district goals. We're going to present to you tonight what our baseline data shows. It's our NWEA assessments that we've given in the last month to kind of give you a sense of where that baseline is starting as we start the school year, to give you a sense of that as we're progressing. Also, we will be updating you as to our status on IT and our IT distribution and our subsequent orders for additional computer devices. And scroll down a little bit there, Dan. We'll also be going over the current COVID statistics, which we're obligated to do in this review. And so I have all of the breakdowns of the county COVID information, which we've been sharing regularly. This is just part and parcel to the plan. And then we'll also be detailing, again, the instructional formats of students. And if anything has changed in this last month, which it has not, we've been in the same instructional format this month as we have been since the start of the school year. When we head into November, likely this update will change depending on your decisions this evening. Under number 8, you'll see some new bolded information that is there. That is a new add. And that is that we will reconfirm the instructional delivery method that is offered for each grade level, including pre-kindergarten, as well as special populations, that including special education, English as a second language, and those folks. So that is what we'll be updating you on this evening. In addition to two-way interactions. So one of the ways that, we do student count as well as student attendance is through a two-way interaction, that being an individual contact between the student that is remote and the teacher. So that can take the form of a Zoom meeting. It can take where you have live instruction that is synchronous. It can also be in the form of a phone conversation. It can be in the form of an email exchange, any type of communication essentially that is between a teacher and an individual student, and it has to do with the content at hand. So, and so again, this report has us presenting to you those two-way interaction rates for this last month. So we'll be presenting that to you. So those are all of the part and parcels of what we're going to be presenting to you as we look at this plan tonight. So in this plan, we will jump to the, first of all, if you scroll down to the educational goals. So again, I'm not going to, this is all online, but I just want to refresh your memory as to the online or the educational goals. So continue to scroll down. So right here, so you see 2 goals. And again, these were approved by you last month with the original approval of the plan. But essentially, goal 1, it has to do with improving reading and ELA. That's English language arts, from fall scores to spring scores. And then likewise with math, and again, these are K-8 goals. With math, again, improvement of student growth measured through NWEA from fall to spring. So those are essentially what those entail. Now, to further that, we will be looking at subgroups. So the special population groups, ethnic groups, we'll be looking at achievement in those subcategories in addition to just the holistic scores. So we'll be looking at increases within all of those. So at this time, I think what I'd like to do is segue to the test scores. We'll come back to this, but I'd like to put, since we're on the topic of those benchmark scores, one of the things that we've done over this last month in all of our grade levels has been this NWEA student growth testing, which all districts were obligated to complete within the first 9 weeks of the school year. So we're actually ahead of the game on that. And we've got our first set of results that are in. What I'm going to present are just the holistic scores. When we get to the January meeting, we'll be presenting more of the breakdowns of the subpopulations, that being the ethnic, broken down by ethnicity and special populations. This chart is just, again, this is all in your packets, but this chart was put in there for reference in terms of when you look at reading and math, The reading is in red, the math is in blue, and these are by grade level. If you see in the fall column where they should be in terms of their mean score, their RIT score, that is indicated. So that would mean that for a fall score, if they're in that first mean range, that means they're on grade level or on target to be grade level for that point in time for the fall. So I say that because now we'll put up the scores that we have elicited so far. So if you can switch to the student scores. We got a lot of documents we're toggling back and forth with. So here we go. Yep. So if you can see this, this begins with grade 1 because kindergarten is using dibbles. So they're using a different measurement for their assessment. So NWEA is starting at grade 1. And this is, as you see, this is math. And it has our 4 elementaries, first grade. And you can see the average RIT, or the average mean score, which, again, if you went and compared back to that chart, you would see that it equates to that students are doing very well, where it actually is showing that almost 75% of our students are testing above grade level for this point in time, according to what the national means would be. When you, again, here's kindergarten, and where they're at 93%. Now I say this with, although that may look very impressive, what this also could mean is that students at home are getting a little bit of help when they're taking the test. So there is probably a little bit of bias in these results. Are our students really performing that well? I suspect that they're probably getting some parental help as they're completing their assessments, which is one of the downfalls of doing online assessments, from home. We'll see as time goes, and we'll also match with what is happening in the classrooms to see if their classroom performance on other measures are equating this level of performance on their standardized tests. But our sense is, from looking at this, that this is probably a little inflated due to parental help. All right, moving on to the next. So we've got here reading. So reading, you can see again, reading is, again, they're doing quite well in terms of the percent that is testing over. They've got 77% in reading that are above grade level at this point in time in the year. At first grade, at kindergarten, 94.2% in reading. So again, similar to math, there's probably a little bit of help going on here at home on these assessments. All right, next, scroll down to second grade and third grade. So you can see second grade with math is at about 58.4% of our students that took the exam are trending above grade level at this point. In third grade math, very close to about the same, 58.9%. So very similarly, as you scroll over in reading, in second grade, 63%. And in third grade, about 70.8%. So you can see we're trending very well for where we should be at this point in the year. Grade 4 and grade 5, grade 4 math, 52%. And fifth grade, about 42%. Now we're getting to where it's about typical of where you see students at this point in the year at that grade level. So this is more indicative of, I'll say, these tests being done independently. In reading, grade 4, grade 5, grade 4, 67.5%, and grade 5, about 55%. And again, those scores are about what we typically see this time of year when they're in seat. So, like I said, the younger grades, it seems that they're a little inflated. The latter grades there are pretty accurate to what they'd be in seat. We move to the middle school, 6th grade. You can see 6th grade math, about 49.1% that are testing above grade level. Again, that's fairly equal to where we are typically when we're seated. That's in 6th grade. 7th grade, about 42.3, and then in 8th grade, 42.8. So again, from an independency level, those are fairly accurate, again, for first assessment in the fall. From a reading standpoint, middle school, grade 6, 53.9%. In 7th grade, 55.6, and in 8th grade, 50. So, you know, those scores are about average, about where we see ourselves typically. You move on to high school reading, 9th grade, 50.6%, and in 10th grade, 57.4%. You scroll over to math. There's algebra 2 and geometry. Algebra is about 24.5. That's a little low in comparative to where we typically are this time of year. Geometry at 80%, however, is a little bit higher than we see this year at that time of the year. So it's interesting that we see, you know, algebra on the lower end of normal and geometry at a higher end than normal. Likewise, 10th grade, 11%, algebra 2 at 68%, geometry at 18%. So you see a big fluctuation 9th, 10th grade. Some of that has to do with the number tested too. As you look at, you know, the number tested has a variant that feeds into those percentages too at each of those grade levels. And then at 11th grade, you see algebra 2 at 46% and geometry at 14%. So, you know, it begs the question as to the 9th graders that took the geometry versus the 10th and 11th graders taking the geometry, what those differences. Of course, the 11th graders taking geometry is only based on 14 kids. So that one's a little skewed just based on the fact that you had a very low number at that level that took geometry in comparison. So this gives you, again, a breakdown, and I went through these really quickly, but it just gives you an overview of kind of where our baseline numbers are trending in math and in language arts throughout the grade levels. Again, we have not yet applied the subpopulation achievement to this yet, so we will be. When we come back to you, particularly in January, when we're talking about the goals specifically, we'll be presenting information to you that has all of the breakdowns of that data, in addition to, you know, other formative information that will also feed that data conversation. As I said, there's some numbers there where, you know, we're a little skeptical that they're really as high as what is being reported. And it's probably due to, you know, factors at home that they're getting help that we ordinarily wouldn't have if they were in the classroom doing it independently. So again, we're going to see how other classroom work either matches that or doesn't. and we'll be able to get a better picture. But that's a really first blush at the benchmark testing that we have moving forward. Questions on that I can answer?
Hey, Dr. Shores, and I think you did a good job of addressing it with the I'll say an asterisk on this data potentially outside of baseline data. Is there anything that we can really take from it? I mean, I've looked at the numbers and I'm cautious on making any real stance on it without any comparisons almost.
So, what we're looking at this, I mean, we're looking at it really from the eyes of being in this remote world, which is brand new to all of us, and is student growth continuing on a similar trajectory as it would be as if they were back in seat in normal times. And we're finding that in many of the grade levels, they are, particularly the middle grades, the middle school level, upper elementary, middle school. We're seeing a little dip in high school, and what the high school typically would be in seat. And I think that has to do with the number of students who ultimately took it. It's skewed because not every student took it or completed it. And then with again, contrary, the lower elementary is higher than it typically is when they're in seat. And again, I think that's because of folks getting help. So, we're trying to gauge this with maintaining the same quality of instruction that leads to a quality output. We're trying to sense, is that the same, lesser, or more so in this remote mode than in an in-seat mode. And we can see that there are levels that match each of those situations. So that's what it tells us. But again, when we add more classroom work, classroom assessment information to the standardized test information, it'll give us a truer picture of really what's happening. And so that's what we aim to garner.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Dr. Shores, sit here.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to switch devices. So what are we doing to make sure on top of this that we're not leaving students behind, to make sure, that the ones that need help are getting the help in this remote environment?
Well, support comes in a variety of ways. So there are, obviously, we have, everything from teacher office hours where it's one-on-one, that there's support that's given by a teacher to a student in those time periods. There is paraprofessional assistance that helps with either small groups or individuals, particularly if there's special education or an at-risk student. There's ELL servicing that assists students through their assignments. So they're in and out of their synchronous world.
So how are we determining when those engagements are needed? So we're not letting the kids get behind, that we're staying on top of those needs.
How is it determined, or what?
Yeah.
So it's,
how do we know, how do we make sure we're on top of the interventions in a timely manner so no one's getting left behind? I know we have all the stuff, but what are we doing to make sure students are getting help when they need it before it gets too late?
Well, there are reach outs that happen. That's what folks are doing. So there's reach outs that are happening by the teacher if things are sliding or there's questions or someone's not attending, or there's reach outs that are done by the teacher. There's reach outs that are done by parapros. So, I mean, they watch to see what the achievement levels are or what the attendance levels may be. And then they reach out at that point. There's parent communication that occurs.
Okay.
There's intervention staff that intervenes as they start to see things slip. So those attempts are being made as they're looking at their own classroom data.
And do you think those are being successful at this point? mean, more so than the last time we went through this?
I think so. I think in most cases, I'm not going to say every single case is more successful, but I'll say that mostly,
Okay,
yeah. Not to say that there's not room for improvement, but I would say that we're catching the most that I think it's better certainly than where we were in the spring, put it that way.
Hey,
Yeah.
Mr. Lockhart, yeah, and I've heard from a couple of parents too that the feedback from the teachers when students are missing assignments or have a lack of activeness in class, we'll say, that some parents are actually surprised because they get reached out to by the teachers before they can even go to Parent Connect. So
Yeah.
it's been a good feedback loop from that standpoint. At least, like I said, most of the people I hear from at this point are either high school or elementary, but that feedback loop is there. I don't like to Dr. Shore's point. I don't know if how broad it is, but a couple of parents have already reached out to me and said they were surprised how quickly teachers are reaching out when something is potentially wrong.
yeah. And I was hoping other board members would chime in since I don't have any kids for that feedback anymore that are in, Avondale system anymore. They're in college, so.
Yeah.
That's
Thanks
what
for the
his
information,
perspective
Sean.
is.
Yeah.
Yep,
yeah.
thank you.
I have to agree with the teacher's hour has been very helpful.
To give you an update on our IT, our laptops. So we have distributed quite a few laptops. We have just at least one per family, most cases 2 and 3 and 4 per family. It just depends. So we've got a lot of devices that are out there. I don't know of any family who has asked for a device that doesn't have one. Everybody is equipped with at least one. We've got an order that's coming in, should be shortly here now. End of October, we'll be getting a shipment. I believe about 1,000 computers, and then mid to late November, we'll be getting about another 1,700 computers. So when all is said and done, we will have what will be more than a one-to-one, one device per child in the district at that point. So that is phenomenal because that sets us up for should we have to switch and go to remote rather quickly, we will have the devices at hand in which to do so. Also, we will have the devices for shortly here for every high school child because we know that primarily at that level, that is integral to what they're going to be using as they are working in seat at the high school. So those will be in, should be beginning to mid-November, should the shipments be on time, which that's another, who knows, but that's what we're being told. So from an IT perspective, certainly by the end of November, we will have reached that one-to-one. And that's really thanks to the COVID dollars that we've received federally, all of the federal CARES Act monies that we received for just these types of purposes. We've been able to put to good use and purchase these devices that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to purchase. So we look forward to that point when we are at one-to-one. All right. I want to go over as part of the reauthorizing plan that is if you go back to the plan template that we had on before, Dan. We're going to go back to the document we were looking at the onset. There you go. So if you scroll down, Dan, to the reconfirmation form. Oh, must be the other attachment. There we go. So here we go. So just to reconfirm our instructional delivery, this is the form that we will turn into the state, as well as be posted on the backside of our plan. Again, our plan is already on the website. This is just the October version of the reapproval. So if you see where it says reconfirm instructional delivery method, again, we were 100% remote this month for October 2020. We are in that first 10 weeks of the school year by which the Board of Education had approved going remote for this span of time. We've been in this remote mode throughout this month and last month. And again, the highest needs special populations of students receive face-to-face instruction twice a week on site with our transportation provided, and then they're remote for 3 days. So again, those that are in seat are adhering to social distancing and all the mask wearing protocols that we're obligated to follow. As you scroll down, when you look at, again, pre-kindergarten, that's our ELC, our Busy Bees, all of that early childhood preparedness plan is found on our website. So they are all 100% in attendance. They are in seat. They are a small group. They are masked. And those programs, the ELC and Busy Bees, have been going very, very well. Thanks to Tiffany Mulatto and Peggy McConnell, who have done a tremendous job with both of those programs. They have been operating since the onset of the year, and they have done a yeoman's job in both of those programs to accommodate our families and accommodate our students in seat. Those have been going very well. Our K-5 elementary, our elementary students have been remote, and there is a daily schedule that again spans the length of the day, that has specific times for their core instruction, their specials, as well as set office hours, time for group check-ins and asynchronous work time. And of course, there's daily class meetings, wellness checks, and those types of things. So elementary has stayed on this plan through this month. Middle school, likewise, they have a defined daily schedule. They are in a block where they're focusing on the cores and selected electives. And again, there's asynchronous and synchronous parts of their block schedule that they participate in. They log in daily to their advisory class. And again, that's where they receive their wellness checks and their character education. High school continues to be remote as well. Those students have a defined daily schedule, much like the middle school, with a block. Students have designated time in each of their schedules. There's purple days, there's gold days. And you can see a purple day is periods 1, 3, 5, and 7, and a gold day is 2, 4, 6, and 7. And in those periods, on those alternate days, they have asynchronous and synchronous instruction. And they also have daily advisories and wellness checks and character education. The highest needs special education students, as I mentioned, they have face-to-face instruction twice a week. With transportation, 3 days are remote. And again, they adhere to all of our protocols. And this includes our our adult special education program learners. They likewise are on the same schedule as this, where they're here 2 days a week, 3 days remote. We have tutoring that's happening with ELL support that is happening after hours, as well as we have providers that are assisting students during school hours. When we look at the two-way interaction rates, so this is measuring the connections between teachers and students. And these are district averages. So when you look at the entire district, when you're looking at what is that two-way interaction rate, you can see they're all in the 90% over the month of September. Obviously, the first week is the first week, so folks are still getting their devices, getting logged in, all the mechanics about getting into participation. But you can see from there, where that two-way interaction has again, this is from a district average. We've done very well with making those connections. Teachers have done a phenomenal job. I will tell you that we've gone over and above what the requirements are for this, because with a two-way interaction, it just requires that there is at least two interactions with a student per week by one of the teachers. And this is a rate that's based on every day, basically, because we have synchronous lessons that are happening every day. This becomes almost our daily attendance rate. So the reach outs by our teachers, by our staff, go above and beyond what the general requirements are for two-way interactions. So I have to stop and I have to applaud all of our teachers that have painstakingly made sure that they're making connections with every student every day, either synchronously or through their other modes of communication to individual families. So, this is tremendous that there's this degree of reach out to our families on an individual basis. If you scroll down, Dan, you'll see the by building. Oh, it's a different, there we go. So this next slide shows you the two-way interactions by building. And so you can see divided by each week, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, all the way through the beginning of October, where the rates are. And you can see where they're trending by building. And so, again, just a tremendous reach out as most of these weeks, the average is in the 90s. There's a footnote regarding Auburn. You got to know that Auburn also houses the GSRP program, and that's only a 4-day-a-week program. So because their average is mixed into the Auburn numbers, it decreases the overall rate a little bit, which that's not indicative of all buildings. That's just an Auburn specific issue, because that's where GSRP is housed. And the other you see is our Diploma and Career Institute, our DCI at the bottom. And you can see there that, the percentages are lower than you see the rest of the district. DCI is our statewide virtual program. So again, you've got students that are logging into this program from everywhere in the state. It takes them a while to ramp up. Many of these folks don't get enrolled until second, third week in September. So you can see where they started at week 1 and where they've ended, at the beginning of October. So you see a growth trajectory there, because that program specifically, because they have a lot of at-risk students that make up that program, again, from all over the state, oftentimes they are very slow to get started in the year with getting enrolled, getting set up. But you can see that they are trending back, now that we're into October, those rates are trending upward. But you can see at all of our seated buildings, again, very, I'll say, impressive rates. And this is essentially, and I'll underscore it, it is like a daily attendance. Because again, these are daily interactions that our teachers are having with students.
Hey, Dr. Schwartz, when you highlight that, so is the process basically to calculate the statistic that a teacher would engage in their class and start, like you said, take attendance and mark who they're having interactions with, and then that gets reported to the building principal and then gets aggregated, and that's what we have the results of that you're showing us?
So yeah, so what they do is they document in MyStar. So when they do their when they do their two-way interactions, the teachers are going in under each student that are in that Zoom or that they're interfacing with one-on-one. And there's a series of drop-down choices for how they're meeting that two-way interaction requirement.
Okay.
And then that records it. And then we just did, a query in MyStar to pull the data together. But the teachers are going in every day and they're filling this out as they're doing their attendance. And, as part of when they're doing their Zoom meetings and their, any of their synchronous discussions and things like that.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, the other part of this, I'll say the last part of this is the COVID statistical data. So as we reconfirm the plans, I want to put up the current COVID statistics that we have from our county. You'll see the trend data over this last 7 days. It's no surprise that things are trending upward. In fact, things are trending upward all throughout the Midwest right now. If you've been in any kind of contact with the news, you'll know that the daily reports coming out have shown increased cases. Well, that likewise has also been in Oakland County as well. You'll see the red arrows, which indicates over this past period versus the last either 7 or 14-day period, depending on the category, that numbers have trended upward from where they were. I'll say not dramatically, but they have gone up to some degree. What is, I'll say, positive about this is that although we see an increased number of cases that are going up, we're still seeing a decrease in hospitalizations. So what that says to us is that, yep, we're seeing more of an uptick of people reporting positive cases of COVID. However, they're not going to the hospital. So they're not severe enough to warrant a hospital stay. So because the number of hospitalizations, actually, you see the green arrow is actually going down. So while people are contracting COVID in, call it a latest surge or whatever, they're not going to the hospital, or it doesn't require a hospital stay to the degree it did earlier on. So that's actually good news. The risk determination, you'll see the last column there, county level risk determination is a C. That is still on par with where it's been, which is, A is the best, B is good, C, and so on. It goes down to, I think it is F or G is the worst. So sitting at C, we're okay. It hasn't changed our designation yet. It has not changed the county's advice or determinations for schools to go in seat. It has not changed any of that. So although we're seeing some increased cases, as you see by age group at the bottom, so you see the red arrows that are indicating that most age groups are showing an upward trend from where they were in the last period. We're not, again, these aren't dramatic increases that we're seeing, and I'm comparing to I've got the other set of data in front of me from earlier on the last period. So when you look at the high schoolers, for instance, that 14 to 18 year age group that's showing total cases of 80. In the last period, it was 63. So they've gone up, from 63 cases in the county to 80 cases over the last period of the last 14-day period prior to this 14-day period. So I'll say 28 days ago. When you see school age of 5 to 9, this is showing 31 cases in the county. In the 14-day period prior to this, it was 20. So they've increased 11 cases in the last, or in this current 14-day period over what they had in the prior 14-day count period. So in all of the numbers follow a similar pattern. So again, we're not seeing dramatic increases, but we are seeing, an increase. The percent positivity was in the last 14-day period, it was 3.17. It is now at 3.55%. So again, we're not seeing a dramatic increase, but we are seeing an increase. So questions on this data from the board?
Nope.
None for me.
Nope.
Not for me either.
And nobody knows, in terms of, is this just a short-term spike, or is this something longer lasting? I mean, you don't know. Again, no one has a crystal ball to know how this is going to ebb and flow. But, the weather has gotten cooler, and I'm sure that's a determinant. We'll see, obviously we keep tabs on this every week with how things are trending. But it's just, it's hard to predict how it's going to ebb and flow as we start to move into winter.
Dr. Schwartz, I will ask one thing.
Yep.
As opposed to earlier, the health department is doing a lot better now in helping with this data. Before they kind of didn't want to get engaged. Now
That is true. Yes.
Yeah.
So they have, partly because executive orders have forced them to. And DHHS, as the executive orders from the governor had been revoked, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, the DHHS, has stepped in and basically picked up on the enforcement of those through the health departments, so that they are now answering to them instead of to the governor. But it's the same. They've been mandated to work with us, and they have. I'll say they have stepped up in the past few weeks to give us the information, the advice that we need as school practitioners that we've been asking for since July. So
And I'm sure just like the schools are eligible for extra COVID money, I'm sure whatever extra they're doing is probably eligible also, that the counties
Oh yeah.
getting reimbursed in the federal government or state funds that are
Yep.
COVID related funds.
Yep. Well, and that's what they're paying for our school nurses through the CARES monies, the federal CARES monies.
Okay.
So our nurses are being paid through them as well.
Okay. Good to know.
All righty. So those are the required components for us to report on as part of the review of our extended learning plans for this month. So any questions on any of the information that's been presented to you thus far?
Nope, I'm good.
Nope.
Also.
So what we will do then is we will be placing this information, this review information on the website so that it is transparent for the public and whoever wishes to review it from month to month. that can see the progression of conversations from a planning perspective, from a COVID perspective, as well as from a student assessment perspective. All right, so if there are no questions on that, I will move to our next item on the agenda. And that is our fall in-seat preparation plans and timelines. So this has been a conversation now for a couple of board meetings as we prepare for allowing the choice for in-seat instruction. And we've been now through a couple of board meetings of conversation, town hall. We've elicited a lot of feedback through surveys. We've had a couple of surveys out now to community, to staff, all around this topic and planning of in-seat instruction. For those that are out in the audience, the board had approved back in August for us to go remote for the first 10 weeks of the school year. That 10 weeks is upon us as of the first week of November. And so we've been busy at work for the last few months with planning what comes after that first week of November. And so we've been working on protocols. We've been working on plans that surround, where do we pick up at that point? And so we have a proposal for moving in seat for our students that has come largely from the conversations we've had as a community, through surveys, through committees that involve staff, community that have been running throughout the summer, in through the fall. It's been quite a large process of bringing all these details together. We've had our school nurses involved from a safety and health standpoint in terms of the review of all of our in-seat protocols from a facility perspective and from a COVID protocol perspective in the buildings. So that's all been reviewed and vetted by our nursing staff. We've also, have had countless conversations about just how the routines and processes will go as we have students in the buildings. We've really left no stone unturned, I think, in terms of making these preparations. Certainly, every facet of the organization has had to be reviewed, retooled. It's been, to say a mammoth undertaking has been, is an understatement. And it's been countless hours of time from particularly our administrators, our building administrators. It's been all consuming in terms of the efforts that have gone into the thorough planning to receive students safely, securely, from a health perspective and also from an instructional perspective. So what I'd like to turn to now in this conversation is to update you. The board at our last meeting had asked about bringing current statistics, data surveys, or data from the surveys. Now that survey window has closed, the board felt that it was important that we kind of let that window close and then bring those statistics to this conversation today. And so that survey window of commitments for families, as well as from staff, expired on Friday. And so we are pulling together that information to begin what would be a staffing process with all of that information. Again, because our proposal is to move forward with a choice for students to stay either remote or come back in seat. It does require quite a complex shuffling of staff because we have a finite number of staff, and we need to staff up to make sure that we are meeting the demand of those who want remote and those who want in seat. And in many cases, that will require a change. It will require, that, students may receive a new teacher come November in order to accommodate everybody who wants whatever their choice is. That's the downside. And so, although we are working very hard to minimize those changes, because we know how important that is to try and keep the teachers the same, we know that it's not possible in all cases. And there will be new assignments for students, whether you're remote or whether you're in seat in November, to accommodate the offering of these choices. So, I want to turn to what the current statistics show. So Dan's going to put up here. So this is based on now just over 3,600 responses. This is as of the end of the day on Friday, and where folks are at in terms of whether they want remote, whether they want in person, and you can see it is 50-50, essentially. So that means, we're going to have 50% remote and 50% in person, at least in the proposal to start November, or that November timeframe off. If you scroll down, Dan, this is just about masks. Most people are in favor of wearing the mask. We have 3% of the people thereabouts are looking to have some sort of a medical exemption, which we will be addressing. But it looks like most people that are coming back are agreeing to wear a mask, because that is if you're coming back in seat, a mask is a requirement. So if that comes with that decision. Mask exemptions. So we know that there are a certain set of folks that need a mask exemption. Then we have how many are going to eat breakfast at school. We'll be still serving breakfast in the in-seat format. Obviously eating lunch at school. We will be having lunch during school as usual. Free and reduced lunch. All of that will obviously continue. To use buses, you can see about of those that are planning on coming back, about 57% do not want to use the bus. They'll probably drive their own child or carpool. 42% are saying we will use the bus. So, and in some cases, we will be having to change bus routes accordingly. When you scroll down on this, so again, 50-50, this kind of shows each building and where each building is with how many want seated, how many want remote. So you can see in the purple column, the percentages at each building. You can see the elementaries are lean more toward wanting to be in seat. You can see the middle school is about 45.7% in seat, and high school about 47.3% in seat. The elementaries are in the 60%, with the exception of Graham as the outlier at 40%.
Dr. Schwartz, do you have any theory when we go almost 60-40 across the board at the other elementaries, what is different maybe about the demographics, or why Graham is an outlier there?
So you know what? I had a conversation with Tony Harris about this. Why do we see the percentages what they are at Graham that's different? And Graham, as you know, houses a larger school of choice population, many of which come from Pontiac. And what an interesting dynamic there that he shared with me is that many of these families are hesitant to come back because they're still having remote church service. So they put a lot of stock in their faith and in their church. And when their church is remote and their church is still having remote services, they likewise follow up with the same attitude toward school. So I thought that was an interesting perspective, because I had not thought of that would be, but folks are heavily influenced about what their church is doing and how their church is handling the pandemic currently. And that attitude extends itself into their attitude towards school, which again, I thought was interesting. And I'm sure there's probably more to that percentage, but I think that that could be a major reason why.
Sure. I appreciate that. Thanks. I mean, I know it's all theoretical, but it was just interesting that that's almost flipped of
It
everything
is.
else.
It's
Yeah.
almost flipped opposite. Right. Right.
Well, I appreciate the fact that we did wait to see what these numbers are, because these are a little bit of a contrast to what we were looking at last week.
So you're right, Sean. They were about 60-40 last week in
Right.
favor of in-seat. Now we're about 50-50.
Mhm.
And I think that drop in-seat, that 10% drop, I'll say, is probably due to a variety of factors. I think, folks have been influenced by some of the media attention around the COVID surge over these last few days, because we've seen people changing their minds over these last few days that the survey was open, as the media was on this second surge conversation. So we saw some flux there. We also saw following the town hall that we had last Wednesday,
Mhm.
that some numbers dropped following the town hall conversations.
I agree. It was a lot of information. What is there, unless I missed it, did we get some totals or some updated totals for the teachers also?
So we do.
Oh, sorry.
Right-
I
right here.
could lead in.
Oh, you're good, Sean. You led right into it. So
Good segue.
the teacher responses, this is the AEA. And again, blue is in seat, red is remote. So you can see 64.3 in seat, 35.7 remote. And that's based on 207 teachers out of the 229 that we have. So this is who had filled out the survey by the expiration of the survey on Friday. From a parapro perspective, parapros 66.7% in seat, 33.3% remote. So
Good data.
I agree.
On the respondents of 48, how many parapros do we have? Just curious.
total number of parapros are, it's in 62, 64, right in that
Okay.
range.
It's not 150 or something.
No, it's 62, 64. And many of these parapros are special education support parapros. That's the biggest contingency of our parapros.
And any idea on why the maybe 22 teachers that did not respond? I'm just curious.
I don't know why they didn't respond.
Yeah, I
Good.
think
Probably,
like
probably because they probably had no preference, would be my guess. There's probably 20 that just didn't care either way.
yeah, and I think the extra time, like Dr. Schwartz, you talked about the town halls, I thought went well. I attended half of the elementary and all of the high school one, and I thought that went really well, from being able to communicate what it's actually going to look like and getting some truth out there to some potential rumors. The one
Yeah.
thing that concerned me going into the town halls is for parents to really understand what a day looks like or what a life in the day of a child is going to look like. And I think we did a decent job of communicating that it's not going to be the same. And I think that had some impact on where parents were from the standpoint of the experience they wanted their child to have too. Because I had parents after the town hall coming up to me or contacting me saying exactly that. So my kids got to wear a mask all day? I said, potentially, depends on the space in the classroom, but that's a reality of a scenario that we're looking at. We'll have breaks, but that's the reality.
Right. At least for now.
Right.
Yeah. It is, it's not like going back to instruction the way it was pre-COVID, as much as we'd like it to be. With the cooperative learning, and the project-based learning, and as much as everybody was rolling up their sleeves and getting into that mode, and certainly that's where we've been headed as a school district, and it pains us to, go backwards. But considering the situation we're in, we have to, because we have to be mindful of social distancing. We have to be mindful of masks, and so that limits us on the collaborative type of teaching that we've been used to. But, we've also learned in this, it's not been all sour grapes. We have learned how to create collaboration electronically with breakout rooms and, other means. And we heard a little bit of that in the commentary at our last board meeting, that it's not all been bad. That we have uncovered a different type of creativity with getting collaboration between students electronically. And in many cases, students rise to the occasion. It's new. And back to your comments, Sean, people want to know, well, what exactly does my student's classroom look like? What's the instruction? And fact of the matter is, we have a pretty good idea, but we don't know it all yet. A lot of it is still going to be getting in there, rolling up our sleeves and getting creative. And some of it is going to be as we go, to say that we can sit here today and answer, exactly what it all looks like. We can to a larger degree, but there's a lot that we still don't know. And as we progress, we're going to uncover new elements of creativity that are going to add to that classroom experience that we just haven't thought of yet or experienced yet. So that's, I think that's one of the positive outlooks about the situation.
And Terry, Mr. Lang, just to go back, as I was sitting here thinking about the difference and potential difference, and it's all hypothetical at Graham, as Dr. Shores mentioned, it has a higher number of free and reduced lunch. Some of those parents may be taking advantage of the Family First Corona Response Act and the I think it's Emergency Family Leave Act.
It's EFMLA, yeah. And I know we as board members, we received some feedback in our mail about that as well. So
yeah, so I think that I'm not sure how big, because we kind of missed a little opportunity there if we had a checkbox on the survey, but I think we just missed that opportunity, unfortunately, to understand how many people within the district are taking advantage of that and would be influenced, because those parents would potentially, I don't say definite, but based on the feedback we got from a couple of parents, they're concerned about their kids going back and them leaving or losing this benefit.
Right.
Yeah. I can see.
Which would be significant. Yeah,
especially with that group of free and reduced lunch parents.
But I don't know that has a weight on, well, maybe going back in seat, I guess, as I'm sure you all understand, but I've had to get into this actually over the last week with an HR attorney. So I'm way more involved with this than I wanted to be. But apparently as the board votes to reopen or to not, so goes those FFCRA and EFMLA benefits. That it's basically binary. If the board goes back in, then the schools are technically open, whether you've chosen to send your child or not. So that benefit does disappear. but
That's
Right,
agreed,
and that's
we
what
don't
the
know how many
concern.
people- Yeah,
Yeah.
how many people are on that, so.
Good point. That's a good point. So jumping to the proposal, I do want, if we can put the timeline up, Dan, just to come back to some things here. So this is the proposal that we have moving forth that we've been discussing. And again, we'd be targeting in coming back to in-person instruction, starting that November 16th, starting in that week. Again, you see TK through 2 integrates in by alphabet over a couple of days. Then they're all in on that Wednesday, followed by grades 3 through 5 at the end of that week on the 19th and 20th. Our gifted and talented program starts with grades 2, their 2-3 multi-age program, and that moves through grade 7. And you can see the continuum again that they transition through that week. The middle school, we have starting on the same trajectory, starting on the 16th. We've switched up a little bit in terms of what the reporting would be that week by grade levels. So we'd have all 6th graders on the 16th and 17th. It would be 6th graders only. And again, the grades that aren't represented here still stay remote for the time. So for instance, when 6th grade is in reporting on the 16th and 17th, the 7th and 8th graders are still doing remote learning on those days. So 6th graders would report in person. There would be asynchronous for middle school on Wednesdays, because in the schedule, and we'll get to schedules as a review coming up, but they have Wednesdays where that's an asynchronous day. So that would be starting on that schedule where you're in Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, but that Wednesday you're asynchronous or remote. So 6th graders would report 16th and 17th for their orientation. And then in 7th grade would report at the end of the week on the Thursday, Friday. And then 8th grade would report on Monday, the 23rd. And then everybody in middle school would report on the 24th, just before we break for the Thanksgiving holiday. So, and you'll notice that with the middle school too, there is an early dismissal on each of those in-seat days for that transition period. And that early release is, while it's asynchronous, it'll be asynchronous through that day. Or I'm sorry, it'll be in seat through that day, but it'll be asynchronous during that time for that teacher early dismissal for professional development. It is for our middle school teachers as they transition to new classes, new content. Some of them are going to be live streaming and getting used to what that is. So there's some training and some planning and some preparation that has to be done to begin to integrate that new teaching model in, particularly with that group of teachers. They also their schedule is also impactful for high school, because we have some middle schoolers that are taking high school classes. And we also have gifted and talented students who are taking classes at the middle school. So that schedule also affects those other programs. And so that time also helps in looking at how we're best servicing or what those students or what adjustments we need to make to better service those students. So, so that, that time is critical. For that teacher preparedness perspective. During the day, what's going to be happening with the students in those days, it's really going to be concentrating on relationships and routines. That's going to be time spent with students on social emotional lesson orientation, team buildings. It's going to be on all the different traffic flow patterns, social distancing protocols as they affect classrooms, hallways, lunches, the arrival dismissal procedures. So there's going to be a lot going on just from that transitionary standpoint in getting acquainted to that facility safely. So so that's the middle school. The high school is going to, in our proposal, continue remote learning, and our proposal is that they're remote learning until the semester break. So as we are looking at the juncture of making this transition at the trimester for elementary and middle school, which becomes a natural transition point for these students from a grading perspective, from a scheduling perspective. We likewise have moved our proposal for high school to be that for the end of the semester. So in prior discussions, I've been a proponent of getting obviously students back in, and that included high school, and I've made the argument about, allowing time for students to catch up and be back in, so that students that aren't doing well remotely have a chance to get back in and to raise their level of proficiency in a class, raise their grades. And as we've looked carefully more into that, and we start to look at, okay, well, if we did that, it would create some, as you heard in the commentaries at our board meetings, particularly in the last couple of weeks, that scheduling change would require, for some students, a change in teacher. It could be a change in schedule that becomes mid-semester or just past mid-semester. And so you start to weigh, okay, what's the bigger advantage or bigger disadvantage of going back in seat for them now versus waiting until the juncture of a new semester? And, as we've tossed this around and we had a lot of dialogue about it, it really came down to, we would do kids a better service generally if we kept students in their current placements and allowed them to finish where they're at, as opposed to subjecting them to changes that could harm them from a new teacher standpoint, from a schedule change standpoint. That really the time to make that change is at a natural juncture point. So for them, it was high school. So, we listened to folks, we listened to our staff, we listened to community that has voiced, that would be detrimental to their child to make that kind of a change. It would upset their grade, it would affect their GPA. We heard from some that it would affect their college admission. I mean, all of that. So, so we've kind of backed down from that and said, okay, let's look at that as several other districts have done, move that instructional change to the semester. I know Walled Lake just made that change. Waterford just made that change to semester. Berkeley's been on that change. I mean, a number of districts are waiting till that semester juncture now to make that happen. We've also had arguments about, the current surge of COVID, and high schoolers are most susceptible of school age groups with that because they just can't not be social. So, offering another layer of protection for those students who have trended most vulnerably in the school age population of students with the COVID. So a number of arguments as to, why we had, I'll say, the difficult conversations that we've had to move that proposal with high school to the semester. We also listened to the comments at our board meetings. We've also listened to the myriad of emails and phone calls and all the other modes of communication that we've all been getting about, two other themes that have risen as concerns as well. And the high school moving that is one of them, and I think we've solved that in this proposal. We've also heard from many parents about the ability for our K-8 students to have some other point in time in which they could switch if they change their mind to go in seat, say down the road. And so while we've asked for commitments for people to basically think about the year because of the staffing constraints that we're under, and not upsetting the apple cart and making new student placements every month or two, but again trying to preserve the consistency of the instruction with a single staff member for the remainder of the year is why we've asked for that long-term commitment. We have created a process by which students could transfer in at the beginning of the third trimester, pending, some qualifiers. So that could be, it could be a medical qualifier. It could be that performance-wise, they're just not doing well, and they need an in-seat placement. And so, from a performance perspective, we'd be looking at that and making those switches too. So we created a little rubric that we'll be using. Colleen, if you want to kind of review the rubric that we've created for this. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Schwartz. Good evening, Board of Education. Yes, so this is our placement change request process, and it all begins with a parent or a staff member recognizing that the student has a need for change of placement based on either a physical, social, emotional, academic, or behavioral criteria, something that the student needs and they are not getting in their current setting. So this could be moving from in-person to remote or remote to in-person based on their need. The parent or the staff member would request a placement change by consulting with the principal. And then the principal would use a form letter that we have that has criteria in it in those 4 categories. And that would be then sent along to either Marianne Monroe or to myself, depending on the student and what program that they're in. So if the student receives special services, they're going to go, that letter from the principal will then go to Mrs. Monroe. If that parent is just receiving general education services at Avondale, that letter will then come to me. We will then take that information and consult a placement rubric, which has more detailed information on it regarding student needs, and we will work with the parent to gain more understanding of their situation and their needs, and then make a decision at that point in partnership with the principal and the parent. So we do have a process set up. It is it is similar to what we have done with transitional kindergarten, where parents work in partnership with the school in order to make the best choice for the child, best placement based on the needs of the student.
Great, thank you.
Ms.
You're welcome.
Bruna, just a quick question is, and I noticed the split for the 504 IEP and ESLs, is that so that there could be a preference for those students, or is there a difference when we get to the consult the MTSS placement change rubric outside of either you or Ms. Monroe?
It's a really good question. Thank you for that. The reason for the split is because Mrs. Monroe knows the the 504s, the IEPs, and the ESL programs. So those children have specific programs that have been individualized for them. So there might be changes that need to be made in some of their paperwork. So it's some of the work that we've done in other meetings, in other partnerships that involve the parents. So we want to make sure that we preserve those services.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So what protocol are we going to follow when we have new students enter into the district, or say we have private school or parochial school kids that want to come back to the district because we've gone back in seat? They're not going to follow this rubric. It'd be just following as if they were a new student to the district, correct?
That's a really good question. If they're just entering the district because they live here, then yes, we would probably ask their preference and look for best placement based on their neighborhood school and numbers. And I don't know, Dr. Schwartz, if you want to explain anything more beyond that, because we're not asking for a change of placement, we're asking for an original placement at that point.
Right.
Yeah, correct. We would have a discussion with that family individually and then make the appropriate, choice. Now, it may be that depending on how the numbers go, that family may not be at their neighborhood school. They may have to, if they want an in-seat situation, for example, it may be at a different school if that particular grade level is full at their neighborhood school. So those are things, again, we'd have to look at individually with those families.
Have we done any accounting for that as we've looked at all the numbers and staffing? I mean, I know there's probably not a way to.
We can certainly in some cases try and pad, as we always do.
Right.
When we do on a typical fall, we try to pad room in classrooms, and we are going to certainly attempt to do that with the current exercise that we're in. But it's just, I can't sit here right now and say I guarantee that,
Sure. Okay.
But certainly we're going to give every effort to, have some leeway. Any other questions on this? So this again was another change that we had made as we listened to the community. The third change that we made was the default. So originally we said the default, if we had a family that was not responding to the survey, not responding to phone calls as a follow-up, that those students would automatically be defaulted to in-seat. So we've listened to the concerns folks have had with that. And likewise, we've altered that protocol to the default being online. The caveat is that we are creating a process by which there is follow-up with those families, close follow-up, to identify if that really is the best placement for those children. And I'll give you an example. One of the reasons why we had said that we would default to in-seat is because if we're not getting a response from the survey and subsequent phone calls, it would lead us to believe that perhaps that family is a non-English speaking family. And certainly if we have a situation where there's a non-English speaking family, being remote would probably be not a beneficial experience for that child. So they would be, obviously best served in seat. So, we were thinking along the lines of those types of continuums where if it's non-responsive, it's non-responsive for a reason. And probably because they either don't speak English or there's some other extenuating circumstance by which they're not being responsive. So that's why we were defaulting to in seat. But we can default to online. However, we need to make sure that we are following up closely with those families to ensure that there is not, a performance or a growth issue academically. So those are the three big themes that we've taken from all the commentary over the last couple of board meetings and even through the town hall about one, the high school and the semester start. Two, everyone having some chance of a switch at some point before the end of the year, likely that third trimester when there's another clean break in the schedule or a fresh start in the schedule. And number three is changing the default to online from remote. So those are the big three themes that we picked up on in all of the commentary we've heard, and we've adjusted those accordingly.
Dr. Schwartz, I have a question.
Sure.
Regarding the high school, I understand the elementary school. I understand that. Kind of rethinking the high school and sending them back at the end of the semester or to start a new semester in seat. I just want to make sure we exhausted all of our options as far as can we get the high school students back into seats quicker. And I keep bringing up live streaming to do in parallel with remote learning.
So one of the things that
sorry, go ahead.
I said one of the things that we're looking at is with our students of special needs is getting those high school students or those subpopulations of students back sooner. So those that are I'll say most affected from an academic perspective, that we're working to put plans in place to bring those folks back earlier than the semester break, particularly the ones that need the servicing the most.
Okay. I get that, but I'm just trying to look at ways that we can get the high school kids to get back into class. Getting a lot of flack. I think a lot of students are really itching to get back and see and get that face-to-face learning. And I think it's problematic for the high schoolers and both academically and socially. And just wanted to throw it out there once again that Troy, I believe, is doing live streaming classes, and I think a few of our other neighboring cities are doing the same thing. And I'm just wondering why we can't seem to pull that together. It seems pretty straightforward if you were to broadcast the class with students in class that choose to be in class, and then the kids that do not choose to be in class can get the same instruction from the same teacher and their same schedules, only remote.
So what we're attempting to do is we're attempting to the live streaming is, as opposed to other districts, is not our primary solution district-wide, which is why we're going through the arduous staffing process that we're going through currently in terms of the rescheduling, is so that we, we'd like to have students in situations where they are in seat or they are remote. And there's going to be situations where we have to do streaming because of certifications and, single classes that only certain folks can teach and so on and so forth. So, but, unlike Troy, Troy has made a K-12 streaming solution. And that is not something that we got on the bandwagon with because frankly, that's extremely difficult, particularly, from an elementary perspective to take that route, which is why we want a strictly remote teacher and we want a strictly in-seat teacher. And we want that to be the major solution from a K-12 perspective, knowing that, yep, there's going to be situations that are going to be streaming that we have no choice to do, but we've not made that our primary solution. So, we know that in the schedules that there will be There will be teachers who are, as part of their schedule, they'll be teaching periods that are in seat. There's going to be teachers that are periods remote, and there's going to be periods where they're teaching and they've got streaming. You know, it's going to end up to be all the above, scattered throughout. But we were careful not to just jump on what is easy. What's easy is make everybody stream,
Right.
but it's not effective. So do we want effective or do we want easy? So, you know, Troy's taking it the easy way. We wanted to make it so that it, you know, there's a greater sense of quality, you know. And so that's, you know, and that's some of the sacrifice that we've gone through in the processes that we've done. I mean, sure, we could move the high school earlier, but, you know, we would have a number of students who would be negatively impacted by that. And that's the problem.
Yeah, we don't want to buy into that. That's the scheduling nightmare and havoc on the kids too. I agree.
I
Thanks
mean,
for explaining that.
yeah, we could have gone the Troy route, but again, that's the easy way out. We're better than that, from, you know, my perspective, in terms of our kids deserve better than that.
Thank you.
Dr. Schwartz, did I hear at the town halls, because I also was on both the elementary and secondary town halls, that we're going to make it, once we do get the high school back in and the middle school, that our students will be able to participate in some of those things that make Avondale finest, whether the arts programs, the sports programs, even our remote students will be able to participate in those safely?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So if you're a remote student, you have the same abilities to participate in any type of after-school activity, clubs, athletics. The sky's the limit in terms of, you know, the after-hours engagements. That's no different for a remote student than an in-seat student. Now, the caveat is that for the remote students, obviously, there's transportation and things like that that have to be had to get them to those activities. But those activities are still viable.
Okay. Now, Terry, were you talking about the after-school activities or the in-school activities like band, choir, etc.?
Wayne, Dr. or Mr. Kakuda, I was specifically speaking about after school, but I think that, you know, that's I see Mr. Hicka online here. There's nothing like when band class comes around and your son plays the euphonium. It takes a whole new meaning to Zoom calls for sure when it's right outside your door. But you know, a good question, Mr. Kakuda, is, you know, how are we going to do things like band when half of that band is remote and half of that band is in person?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think we're still working on a lot of those details. I don't know that Mike and Rachel have all of those things ironed out just yet. I don't know, Mike, if you have some answers to those questions, feel free to chime in if you do.
None that we're ready to publicly comment on.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, you know, it's still a work in progress. We don't, you know, and I know that Mike and Rachel are working with colleagues in other districts that are doing the same thing we are. And, you know, what we can't have is we can't have people just coming and going, where they come in for band and then leave, you know, throughout the day. Or so we're trying to, you know, minimize the influx of people in and out of the buildings. So you can't have people coming in for select classes and then leaving, and this constant transition throughout the day of things, because that upsets the apple cart with the cohorting and the ability to do all the COVID tracing should that be necessary. And so as much as we'd like to do that, it violates all kinds of other things. So we're working how that remoteness with things like band, like choir, are going to function in a remote world with seated students.
And I had actually had two parents approach me about this who have students that are OTEC students that are, I guess OTEC's going back into session here coming in November-ish, I believe. At least their students are for cosmetology. And
Correct.
was
Yep.
wondering how much of a ringer does that put into the planning you have, or how does that dovetail into what we're looking at the high school?
Yeah, right. Can we talk about that?
I don't, Doug, maybe you can speak to that since you have a better sense of the schedule than I do, but.
Yeah, so OTEC is opening up in person on November 2nd. They have selected 2 days, either Monday or Tuesday or Thursday or Friday for different districts throughout the county. And those districts will then attend those hours. We were talking to Lisa Evans, who is one of the counselors at the high school, who has been heading up the OTEC conversation, and she had a conversation with them on Friday. Since many districts are all doing different types of models, they are aware that our students may only be able to show up 1 day out of the 2 if their schedule doesn't permit that. We are looking at because right now we have 1, 2, and 3 hours 1, 2, and 3 on our purple days, and then 4, 5, and 6 on our gold days. It overlaps our third hour, especially when we go to the extended 722 to 222 schedule. And so any of those kids that we are able to move without impacting their schedule, like if they've got an AC class and we can move them to an English class that they had that overlap hour, we're going to look at doing that. If we can't do that, then the students will go to OTEC 1 day while they can, and then when we get into the second semester, we'll actually switch those classes around, and they'll be in class 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, so that we don't overlap those hours anymore, and we can make those adjustments. In our conversations with OTEC, they have been very accommodating to all the districts around us, and we'll continue to give our students full credit and full hours, and there'll be some asynchronous portions on the 1 day that we don't go, and on the 2nd day that matches up with our schedule, the students will be full hands-on.
Super. Thanks, Mr. Wilson.
Absolutely.
Well, I was going to mention, this is Sid, we can't even get the Pledge of Allegiance in sync. Good luck with band and choir.
Well, I wouldn't hold us as the typical band students that have any rhythm.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It only gets really bad, Mr. Lockhart, when I have to put Blake onto the treadmill so that he can emulate marching band. So.
I mean, I guess one thing's for certain is, even though when the kids do go back to school in seat, it's going to be a different environment and experience than what, it's not business as normal. I mean, there's more isolation, there's no really time probably to socialize and to avoid to avoid spreading the virus, minimizing those interactions. It's going to be different.
That is correct.
Good or bad. So I don't know if parents are expecting business as usual, but it's not going to be that.
Not for a while.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'd like to jump into the schedules because some of this we looked at last time, but I just want to refresh your memory. So we're going to put up the elementary schedule. So the remote and the in-seat with elementary is fairly consistent. So again, you've seen this before, but this really has specific times of the day where they have their core academics. So the morning starts with their positivity project time, their P2 time. Then they have their ELA and math focus with their synchronous and asynchronous at that point, small groups. So they have time in their mornings where it's basically that ELA and that math concentrations, and that's going to be no different, frankly, in seat than remote. As you move to the afternoons, and again, they'll have lunch. Lunch will be not in the classrooms, but lunch will be in the cafeteria as well as other facility spaces, because we are looking to accommodate a 6 to 8 foot spacing between students in times where they don't have a mask. And so obviously at lunchtime, they're not going to have a mask as they're eating, so we will space them out even further. And that may necessitate that we're using a gymnasium or a partial gym or a media center, or some other room like that to also house students for lunches. In the afternoons, they will have their specials, again, social studies and science. And then as you look at the Wednesdays in particular that you see in yellow, so every Wednesday there will be professional learning community time or professional development time for the staff. So that is time for remote teachers as well as in-seat teachers to get together to collaborate, to do lesson planning, to co-create videos, things of that nature for instruction, time to look at data, you name it. So that's time for them to get together to, again, accentuate, provide quality to instruction, lessons, and so on. So that'll be an every Wednesday offering for them. We also have childcare that's available on those Wednesdays, so folks could utilize our Busy Bees program that will be available for these early release Wednesdays for folks that need that service. From a middle school perspective, we'll put the middle school schedule up. What the middle school schedule will look like. So you can see, again, you have Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday with a Wednesday asynchronous day. You can see that their block schedules will continue as they have from the beginning of the school year. That Wednesday asynchronous day will be the same as the high school. High school likewise will have an asynchronous day on that Wednesday, and that is largely for you'll see office hours, because again, you have teachers at these levels who are instructing in various modes. So you have a teacher, you can have a single teacher who is teaching in seat, who's also teaching remote, who may also be streaming. So you have all these different modalities that are happening with middle school and high school teachers. So that takes a lot of coordination. And so these office hours are really for those whom they are in remote means with or in streaming means with, so that, it's critical that they have that time. This also allows us to be deep cleaning the buildings in the middle of the week. So on these Wednesdays, both the middle school and the high school will be in a deep cleaning mode. When you consider these two buildings, they receive a lot of traffic from a non-cohort perspective. We also have locker rooms in these buildings. We also have athletics that happens in these buildings. We have rentals that, that these two buildings house into the late hours of the night, so there is a lot more activity in these buildings than say our elementaries that we really need to be cognizant of from a deep cleaning perspective. There's a lot more community in these buildings than in an elementary. We are going to have a deep clean twice a week. So once on Wednesdays and then once either on a Friday night or Saturday, and we're still working those out. So there'll be two days of the week that there are deep cleans that are happening. There will be deep cleans at the elementary that are done, again, most likely on a Saturday, could be a Friday night leading into a Saturday, but we're still ironing those out. But again, from a middle school perspective, you can see this will be the daily routine where they start the day in a stable time, where students are in a staggered entry from starting at the 7:53 to an 8:03. So we're going to purposely stagger children in so that we're not having, these big congregations of students that are coming into the building all at one time. So we've allotted time for that to happen, and the same at the end of the day with a staggered release time to get students out. The same will be at the high school as well. So we're not having, this big cattle, stampede in the hallways in the morning of people getting to classes. It's going to be very methodical and routinized of staggering people to their classes. You can see that in this case, there are 10-minute passing times, again, so we can have some staggered dismissals out of classrooms so that there's less congestion in the hallways at these times. And you can see longer blocks of time so that it minimizes the number of transitions in those hallways. You can see the lunch times, and we'll be utilizing at the middle school. It'll be obviously the cafeteria, but also the auxiliary gym will be used as well as another cafeteria. We can switch to the high school schedule. Yeah. So here's the schedule from would be November to January with the high school. Again, you see similarly to the middle school, the block days, the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with an asynchronous Wednesday day with office hours, much the same as what you see at the middle school. And then PLC time also at the end. So their blocks are 90 minutes with a 12-minute passing time. And with the high school, again, that passing time is to allow for staggered dismissals between classes. We're also working on where there will be one-way hallways at the high school because we have enough, obviously, hallways at the high school, and with the traffic flow and rearranging that so that there's one flow directionality in those hallways. So that will make it so that students have a little bit longer of a distance to get to a particular class than what they used to have. So we've allotted extra time for that to occur as well.
I'm sorry, Dr. Schwartz, did you say that schedule is going in November or January for the high school?
That's the November schedule. So that's the remote schedule. In January, we'll put up that one. So the January schedule, again, would look like this. Again, where they've got a staggered entrance, a staggered dismissal at the end of the day. Lunch periods, again, lunch would be in multiple facilities within the high school. They would be 87-minute periods with 12-minute passings. So it's basically the same as the other schedule, just put to more of an in-seat perspective. So any questions on any of those schedules?
Not for me.
Nope.
Nope.
No.
All right, so that I'll say that will take us to the end point that I have of this conversation, unless there's other questions.
And we'll take comments from our public here at section 4, but is there any other board member questions or comments before we move on? And keep in mind also we have time during our voting and our motion that we can do some debating as well.
So one of the things that I wanted to kind of, I guess, have some commentary on, or some dialogue about, is the high school mode of instruction. We've had a lot of questions about mode of instruction as it pertains to students who choose in seat at the high school and what that looks like. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we don't necessarily know everything about how everything looks in all circumstances. And when I say that is because, again, band is a classic example, choir is an example, art is an example, CTE is another example, that what happens in those classrooms may or may not look the same as it does in English or math, or, so there's going to be some creative differences in terms of how instruction is had in each of these situations. And it's also going to differ on a day-to-day basis as well. So I asked Doug just to kind of brief us on kind of what a high school mode of instruction looks like if you're choosing in seat. But keep in mind, it's an evolution, and it's not, I guess there's a perception that it's a one size fits all, that it's going to be just a Zoom type of an environment. It's just going to be, where kids are doing nothing more than what they're doing on their desk in their bedroom, and that's really a misnomer. Zoom is going to be used. Zoom is going to be a major way that students are going to be able to have small groups to include the students who are remote. But it's a misnomer to say, well, that's all they're going to be doing. So Doug, I kind of asked you to kind of chime in on that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, part of this conversation is to lay the foundation for what to expect. So we've talked about it a little bit. Sean talked about it a little bit at the beginning of this conversation as well. This is not 2019. And so if you have that concept in your mind that this is going to be 2019, that we're going to go back into the classrooms and everybody's going to be grouping, sitting in flexible seating, sharing a bunch of materials, hugging each other, that kind of thing. That's not the environment that we're moving back into right now. Our hope is that if we do things the right way, that we can get back to what we all remember high school being like, and being able to do all of that. But in order to facilitate safety for our kids and equitability for our kids, we have to be able to understand that technology is going to be a major component in this. Currently, right now, we use Zoom because all of our students are remote, except for some of them that are coming into our building right now. And when we have 400, 500 students that are in our building, we're going to have 400 to 600 students that are outside of our building as well, that deserve just as quality of an education as our kids sitting in the building. And the way that we are able to do that, sorry, I got cookie on my lips. The way that we're going to be able to do that is through using the tools like Zoom or Google Meet, because that brings everybody together. Our Zoom areas right now allow for breakouts to happen, and we don't have to worry about social distancing because they're already there with each other. But our classrooms do bring social aspects into it as well. It does bring a level of accountability, right? A lot of our kids are sitting at home, and as Sean alluded to earlier, our parents are saying, well, yeah, my kid's doing stuff at home, and all of a sudden they get calls from our teachers or from our other staff members, and they're like, your kid's not doing anything. And so it does bring that level of accountability, but it is going to be, you're going to be sitting 3 to 5 feet away from your neighbors. You're not going to be able to turn and move your desks close to each other and have those conversations. The teachers, depending on their level of comfort and the students' level of comfort, are going to stay socially distant from each other. But we can't have our remote students sit passively on the outside and just watch what's going on in the classroom. Everybody's making these decisions based on their safety, their health, their perspective of it all. And we have to be respectful of all of that, as we have been throughout the years for Avondale. And so it's very important to understand that Zoom is going to be a central tool in how we get people together and how we communicate with each other and how we bring the remote world into where our seated individuals are. But it's a tool. And if you talk to all of our teachers, they're using different things like Jamboard, and they're bringing in other tech tools, Google Classroom, and anything that they can get their hands on to be able to bring kids into activities. Our art teachers are working right now on buying materials so that we can supply those to all of our kiddos. Whether they're in person or remote, they're still going to do that distance-wise, but they're going to be able to live through those experiences. Our teachers are constantly coming up with new and innovative ways to be able to push our kids to be able to not just sit in front of the screen, but interact with each other. But we have to be equitable to both groups of kids. We can't say that you guys that are coming into the building are or deserve a different type of education than our kids do that are sitting remote. That's not fair to anybody. So I'm just letting you know that from the high school perspective of things, it is not going to look the same. We are going to have one-way hallways. Our lunchrooms are going to be distant. We can't have more than 77 kids in a lunchroom in our cafeteria at one time. When they walk into a classroom, the teachers are going to be spraying things down, and they are going to be expected to stay at a distance. And there is going to be limited mobility, because if we don't limit that mobility, then everybody gets up and walks and moves around and gets next to those individuals that we are trying to make sure that we are staying safe with. So I say all of that so that you understand what the high school is going to look like, what that experience is going to be. My goal is to not persuade anything or dissuade anything. My goal has always been to be transparent and to let everybody understand exactly what the game plan is, so that you guys can make the best decisions on whether your kid needs to be in the building or not in the building. But either way, we will support your kid in every aspect that we can.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Well said, Doug.
Thanks.
So with that, that ends the superintendent's report for this evening.